Yes, sir. It's your boy, CD Roll, back with another episode of Watch Your Narrative Podcast presents The League. Yes, back with another episode. A very excited to get this episode on the way. I've been working on this for a while, just getting all my ducks in a row, and figured it'd be a good time to drop you guys with another episode. But before I get started, I definitely want to make sure I explain this pod in its entirety. Explain this pod in its entirety. But before I even do that, let me make sure that I bring up that this episode of Watch Your Narrative is presented to you by Ronald Raymond Consulting. Ronald Raymond Consulting, if you have not heard of it, it is a financial coaching services owned by Cedric Deloach. And if you are in the need of any financial advice, any financial coaching, any financial training, financial education, what that looks like, what that means is think of a personal trainer, someone who you meet at the gym that pushes you, drives you, mentors you to help you get your body right, tight, ready for the summer, ready for the beach, or just get in shape cardio wise, be able to go up a pair of steps without running out of breath, right? That's what a financial coach is. If you need more information, please reach out to myself or go to my website, www.ronaldraymondconsulting.com. Once again, that website is www.ronaldraymondconsulting.com. All right. Now that we've got that shameless plug out the way, let's talk about this episode of Watch Your Narrative presents The League. So, for those who don't know, of course, myself and a bunch of other brothers have been involved in this wonderful league that's brought us all together playing NBA 2K. We've had a lot of fun. We've had a lot of seasons, a lot of seasons. So, because we've had so many seasons now, finally we were able to really come up with, we were able to gather up all of these details, all of these analytics, all of the, accolades that everyone has been able to accomplish. And finally we're able to do, the people have separated themselves. So put it that way. People have separated themselves. When this league first started, it literally started with a bunch of five runs. We would do the best of three, and usually it started somehow with Yoda and Greg talking to each other. The rivalry was deep. They usually would always be on separate teams, and whoever get the best that Sunday usually was on a Sunday. Then that's how it went, and then that turned into season one, our inaugural champions TGM, and then from there it just expanded and went the way it's went. But we've had so many seasons now where we can actually look and see how people have started to begin to separate themselves from the competition. So what this episode is going, number one, what this episode is going to be called, it's going to be called The Head of the Table. The Head of the Table. Shout out to Head of the Table, WWE style, Roman Reigns. That's where this comes from. What this episode will look like. I also want you to envision the Hall of Fame. We've all talked about it. Hall of Fame, sometimes it needs different rooms, right? We need different rooms. Like everybody shouldn't be in the same room. Now, this will not be a Hall of Fame. This is not what I'm trying to go for because people's story are still being written. We still got some guys who just really started to kind of ramp up that we want to see where they're going to go. So we're not doing a Hall of Fame. But currently where you are is what we're going to look at. And there will be four tables. I want you to visualize this if you can see it in your head. There will be four tables. Only specific people can be at this table, at each individual table. And I'll let you know who that is. I'll let you know why. I'll let you know what, the accolades, what the story, the thoughts behind it. And this pod really is, man, just to start a conversation. Let's talk about it. It could be a boring week for you. Let's talk about it. Let's see what you think. I want to know like who you would put at your individual tables kind of once I lay out the way that I'm going to lay out these tables, right? So, without further ado, let's start at table one. Let's start at table one. Let's start at the head of the table. This is this table here is on the stage. If you've ever been to a wedding, usually the wedding party, they sit, at a table by themselves, and you know who this is all about. This is what this table is. This is a guy who has separated himself to me from the pack. He separated himself. He's at this table, guess what? By himself. And before I go any further, let me give you the inspiration behind this pod. Inspiration behind this pod was actually a back and forth between two competitors in a fives run. And I will just say, we'll use, for instance, like say, we'll say it was almost like, Paulo Banchero, who's a very young player, hasn't fully established himself. We know he's good, but doesn't have the accolades. But he was arguing with LeBron James. And hey, as a competitor, nothing wrong with that, right? Even myself, I'm not one of these top guys, right? But guess what? I'm gonna talk, you know, but there's always that place of like at the end of the day, there's a trump card that that guy could easily pull, and then what are you gonna say? Because at the end of the day, yes, Paul Pierce dropped off Kobe Bryant a few times, even won the Finals MVP. Paul Pierce stood up and faced off against LeBron James, even got the better of him once, one or two games. That can happen. Not even just Paul Pierce. I mean, Tobias Harris can have a good game against LeBron James, right? That can happen. At least one game. But who has the more accolades? Who's higher up on the greatest of all time? That's what this list is about. That's what this table is about. That's why this list was inspired. Once again, not to say that people can't talk to people at all. I love that. That's the competitive part of it, right? But there is levels to this. There's levels to this. Now, who you may see me put at these tables, you may not agree, but we're gonna get back to it. This guy, number one, at the table by himself, above the rest, one chair, one table. This guy is a four-time champ, the only one to do it, the only one to do it. So really, to me, anybody that disagrees, you just you got to tell me why, and you got to be able to explain why. Okay, got to be able to explain why. Most people, I think, the majority of it of our association will say this guy's at the top until further notice. The list is fluid, guys. Let's put this out here too. That this person can't be knocked from this table. This is not some exclusive thing where it's not going to change. He can be knocked down from this table, but you got to catch him. Four-time champ, multiple MVPs. I don't even know how many. Multiple MVPs. Two-time Finals MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, what I really like about this competitor is came into the league behind another really, really great player. I mean, a really, really great player was not, well, was number two on that team. Got a name called, was named babysat, and could had to basically get from up under, show people that hey, I'm not that. I am the guy. I'm more than just that. So you had to get from up under that name, win, and then still the name was still there. And then there was a bunch of questions that always come up. Can you win without Sat? Did that? Can you win without having um an overloaded team? Because the second championship had Austin as your third, maybe even sometimes fourth player. Like, so if you got Austin on your team and he's your third, fourth player, oh yeah, your team is stacked. Then you win again. And then now Yosh is your third, fourth best player. And nothing to to this person because he didn't draft the team. It was just on everybody else that made the mistake. The captains made the mistake with the teams they drafted. And once again, that question still popped up. And then even questions about, hey, can this guy be a point guard? Can this guy, set the table for people even after winning as a point guard? Questions were still there. And every time a question was posed, an answer was provided. An answer was provided. I mean, you might as well, I don't know. Can we steal it? Call this guy the answer? Maybe. No donuts. But he has been coined by the Sush himself, a Gote. Sorry, Rob. I'm sorry if you heard that. The Sush, I know you don't like that. But anyway, a Gote, number one at this table by himself. One table, one chair. A Junte, a Gote, Bullock at this table. If I had a thing to do some clapping and some confetti, everything comes out, blah, 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 blah. But once again, this guy has answered so many questions. He's locked in. He's the favorite to win another one this year. I mean, which will be 5. I mean, at this point, what are you going to say? He's separating himself from the competition. Now, that's table one. Now let's go to table two. Now, table two. Table two, we got 4 chairs, 4 guys, 4 chairs, 4 guys. Now, I would love for you guys to play this game with me. I really would. I hope that you do. In the comment section, in the chat, as you're listening, before I give mine, give yours. Who are those 4 guys? A Gote, a Jante is at table one. Now we're at table two. This is that next echelon of guys, and we're talking about not just talent. We ain't talking about what you do in fives and cooking people. No, we talking about accomplishments. What have you done? What have you done? And so that's what we're talking about. And table two, once again, four chairs, table two. Now, one of these guys at table two can actually go over to table one. He is the one guy from table two that can actually go over to table one and even talk to Ajante. This guy is what I would call the head of table two. Hey, head of table two. Let me tell you about this guy. He is a 3-time champ, 2-time finals MVP. He's also one of those guys that has been able to win not only as two of the most important positions everybody knows, point guard, center, has been able to win number one in 3 different 2Ks, one as a back to the basket center who averaged in the finals 23, 10, and 7 easily, was dotting, diamond, passing from the center position. Dominant center, has always been a dominant center. Won his second title as a point guard, and actually probably would have been finals MVP for that as well if it wasn't for one of his role players really having a breakout finals series. And then was able to, the next year, next 2K, playing a different center role, more of a pick and popper, pick and roller, defender, won another championship and a finals MVP again. This guy is none other than Kyle. I mean, once again, you guys can tell me whether or not he's on there, but if he's not at your table too, don't make your list at all. I'll tell you that. Throw it away, gobble it up. I mean, seriously, just put it away. This guy was once called overrated by another player. He's gonna, but from a competitive standpoint, at least from my point of view, a competitor standpoint, I understand it. But once again, we're talking about proof is in the pudding. The only outside of Ajante who has 4, he's the only guy that has 3. Everybody else is chasing, and this is not just a guy who has 3 titles as a role player. No, 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 no. We talking about a 2-time Finals MVP, and actually very well could have been one of MVP, another Finals MVP for his 3rd title. So this guy has been one option one, option two for a very, very, very long time. And I don't think he gets enough credit, mainly because he just puts his head. He's like literally like Jokic. He just puts his head down, man, and just goes and ball. Just goes and ball. What can you say? All right. He's at the head of the table too. He can go over the table one, talk a little bit. He can't sit down, but he can go over there and talk a little bit, right? All right. Who else is at table two with him? Who else are you guys putting at table two with Kyle? So let me tell you how I did mine. I'll tell you how I did mine. I want to know if you guys can get this. There's only four guys in the history of our league, the history of, mostly ZBL, and mostly ZBL. And I'll give a shout out to some guys that I think from MMA that I think are really good too, in shortly. But from ZBL, there's only been four guys, number one, that have multiple championships. Because that's the one absolute thing. We all vote for Finals MVP, we vote for MVP. I've seen people win, and hey, I don't have to continue to talk about it. If you know, you know. I've seen people win Finals MVP that it was more of a we like you vote and we don't like the other guy vote, you know? So that's something that can be voted on. The most absolute thing that you can't take away is championships. That's not voted on. That's mano y mano. That's the most absolute thing. So titles mean the most, right? So these four individuals, they've won multiple championships. They won Finals MVP, and there also have been a MVP of the league as well. It's only been four people. I'm gonna say it again: multiple championships, at least one Finals MVP, and at least one MVP. It's only been four players. One of those players, of course, is DeJounte. The next one is on this table too. This guy is a two-time champion. Once again, Finals MVP, MVP of the league, also a Defensive Player of the Year as well. Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year. So literally, I'm talking about won every award there is to win. And to me personally, had the greatest single season I've ever seen. Actually, if you want to say he's like the Steph Curry, like because he changed the way our league was played. We were playing a certain style of ball, and when he came in and then literally won every accolade that he had to win, and then left, and really everybody started making bills to counteract that bill. Hey man, none other than John Satterfield. None other than John Satterfield. So two of those guys, DeJounte, Satterfield, they are two of those four guys that have been able to say that they were Finals MVP, and multi-time champion. Now, I'm a guy that likes to ask questions. I am a guy that likes to ask questions. So, Jonte had all these questions that we talked about, and he answered them. I'll even give Kyle a question. I mean, can Kyle win a regular season MVP? That's one of the things that kind of escapes him. Well, is can he win a regular season MVP? Which to me, I'll be honest with you, Finals MVP. Although, to me that they're great. I think they're absolutely awesome. And I think but if you think about it, in real life, Chauncey Billups has a Finals MVP. Andre Iguodala has a Finals MVP. And those guys are really good. I mean, possibly I know Iguodala get his jersey retired, so these guys are meant a lot in that series. But we talking about a Finals MVP, it's based off of best of seven. In our case, best of five. Regular season is consistency. It is consistency. So can he ever win a regular season MVP? The question for Sat is, can he win without Bullock? Like, cause hey, I mean, we're just asking questions here. I'm asking questions here, right? Now, some people may not like my line of questioning, but I'm just saying, like, two titles. One is the guy, and Bullock was the number two, the role player. The next one he won was once again with Bullock, and very 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 well could win a third one this year, but it still be winning with Bullock. So is it a crutch, or you know, or are we ready to get away from this table? I don't know. I can't answer that question. He will. I just asked the questions. All right, let's move on. But Sad is one of those guys, though. I'm gonna make sure I say that. I'll make sure I'm very, very clear. I asked that question, but I mean, this you put the right team around him, of course. He can. You put him on Raptors. You put him on the Raptors and replace him and Bullock. I mean, he does the same thing, just differently, but he does it. So like, not I know it can happen, but it can happen. But the facts are, it has not happened. Those are facts. We talking facts here, and everything I'm reading off, these are facts. I'm not what ifs, what at. These are facts. He hasn't won without Bullock. So that's we. I would like to see if that question answered. Next, this guy once again, it's another guy, the third guy of that four, who once again has a MVP, a Finals MVP, and is a multi-time champion, and just overall is a bucket getter. Um, he's another guy that had a bunch of questions too. And this is what the questions were, can he win? For the longest time, he struggled to actually get over the hump of simply winning the big one, winning the championships, been in the finals, but couldn't get over the hurdle of winning. Was an MVP, still couldn't of the league, but still couldn't win. Finally won. Also won his finals MVP and also won MVP, all of that in 1 year. And then the question was, all right, well, that's an MMA, and quotations around the MMA, and I don't feel that way. You win, you win. Titles are titles. If you weren't there, you just weren't there. But came over, back over, changed his play style a lot, really, and then in a different role, a different way, won another title. One of the first ones to win back to back. And once again, multi-time, he actually is a multi-time season MVP, finals MVP, two-time champion. We talking about Yodi, fellas. We talking about Yodi. He's at table two. If you don't agree, you don't agree. But consistency of always being a bucket getter, we know that. Some of the questions were around, hey, is he a point guard? Like, and that's still a question. It is one of those questions that we'll never know if he'll be able to answer. Can he win at the point guard spot? Because the two spots he won at was at the small forward. The two championships he got was at the small forward spot. So that may just be that 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 slot for him. That's where he wins. He may not have to ever answer the question because we know, number one, even that point guard, he's still a bucket getter. He still can get his team. He still got his team to the finals as the point guard. Multiple finals as the point guard. So, but the question it really is, can he win at that spot? And if that's not a question he wants to even answer, if he had, because he has proof, he has the formula, he knows where he can win at. That question may not need to be answered. And once again, we may have seen him take his last season jumper as well, or we may see him next season. Who knows? I don't know. Now, this last spot here, this last chair spot, once again, goes to a person that is one in that four of the people who have won Finals MVP, MVP, season MVP, and is a multi-time champion. So you have to at least have a multiple championships. Now this was very hard for me, right? Because and I feel like, and before I say, well, I just feel like it was a very hard decision of putting this person at this table. This is table two. I think this person deserves to be at this table. Number one, because they won multiple championships. They won the Finals MVP, which meant that they were the guy on the team, and they won a season MVP. And you can say whatever you want to say, but one of the more dominant players in our league every year. But I think the problem is he's also the loudest. And I think you know who I'm talking about. No question. The one who donned him. I'm the one who donned him red smoothie. Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor. And the crazy thing before I go any further, because even me saying that, I can already hear, I can see some people feel the energy like, oh man, no, I'm not want to do that. Like proof. Facts. Only four guys. There's a lot of guys who say that I'm one of them ones and I'm this and I'm that, but it's only four guys, four, who have won multiple championships, won a season MVP, which meant 12 games, 16 games, however many games you want to say, was consistently the best player on the best team most of the time, and was also a finals MVP. And I'm just going to be honest, was robbed of a second finals MVP. And that's where the absolute part of one thing you can't change is the championships. You can vote for whoever you want to vote for to do whatever you want to do. But this guy's dominant. And honestly, as a big, probably had in his run in Texas, probably had one of the more dominant center seasons ever, but it just was overshadowed by the fact that they just they didn't win. So consistently as a big center, and the first championship he won was at power forward, which he still was kind of, similar play style, just back to the basket. And trust me, I was on the other end of that first finals run, and I was defensive player of the year, and he did his thing. He did his thing. And so I gotta give him his props. I gotta give him his loves. I gotta give him his prop. Now at this particular table, because of the other three that are at this table, I would say that he's at this table, but the list is fluid. The list is fluid. And I'm gonna say why. Because now we're going to table three. Four more chairs, guys. Four more chairs. Who will be at these four chairs? Who would you put at your table three? Matter of fact, I want to know who's at your table two. Table one is self-explanatory. If you don't got him at your table one, man, come on, man. Just stop sipping. Stop sipping. Stop sipping, Haterade. Stop sipping. But table two, I want to know who's your four at your table two. Table three. Now, there is one guy from table three, because we already said it. Table two, there's a head of the table. Kyle can go over to table one. Table three, there's a head of the table there as well. He can go over to table two. Can't sit down. It's only four chairs. Sorry, can't sit down. But he can at least go over there, associate a little bit. But then come back to table three and still be the head of the table. This guy. Now, this is why it was very hard for me, but I had to give it to the the guy who had the Finals MVP, the MVP, because this guy also is a multi-time champion. This guy is also a Finals MVP, except he does not have a MVP, a season MVP, which yes, it's a vote, but it's 12 games of saying that you are the most valuable player on usually the best team. Now, this player does have a defensive player of the year. This guy does have a defensive player of the year. Even one season had role player of the year. No other than the guy once again that I quoted in that the standard, Jay Petty. Jay Petty. Now, uh, once again, I'm gonna say this too. This is not Mount Rushmore, right? This is not a Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore, my views on Mount Rushmore are a little bit different because there's so many things that go into more things that go into play outside of accolades and games. It's also, marketability, all these different things. That's just my personal thing. But I'm not talking about ZBL. But I'm just speaking from if I were to do an NBA, it's not going to be my the top four players that ever played the game. It's going to be a little bit different. Tell a story with it. But Jay Petty, to me, is when we talk about big men, there's three big men. Three big men. Only three to me that they have been, and it started with two. It was really initially Petty, Kyle. Petty Kyle. First season I played center, defense wasn't the offensive juggernaut. These guys were more so on just the defensive side. But then I've got away from that. But Chris, to me, jumped into that role as center and became very dominant. So there's been three dominant centers every year, every 2K. There's no question about it. And that's Chris, Kyle, and Petty. They're all different. They're all different. They all play different styles. Their personalities are all different. I mean, their games, their bag, their everything is different, but the end game is still the same. They both have won multiple championships. They they're Finals MVP. Well, two of them are Finals MVP, and two of them are MVP. So it's these guys are just really, really good. And Petty, without a doubt, I don't think nobody would make a question. Some people would probably question Petty being in table two. Who else is at table three? Who else is at table three? Now, um, once again, I'm always going to lean towards the most absolute thing. Most absolute thing is championships, and this guy is a multi-time champion, two-time champion, multiple MVPs of the league. To be honest with you, I don't know how many, and I guarantee you he probably doesn't either. Has the most finals appearances of anyone in this league probably as well every year. I mean, this guy is going to be in the finals every. I think he's probably one of the more versatile players in a sense of can play 1 through 5 and be just as efficient, just as not gonna say just as dominant, but still can be make a huge difference, a difference maker on a team 1 through 5. Somebody, I think, why initially, made some waves some years back, seasons back, calling him the GOAT. Which once again, the list is fluid. The list is fluid. And Jonte said, when I asked him about, it, he said could have been the GOAT. And honestly, the list is still fluid. That still can happen. But there's questions to be asked, right? And I didn't really ask any questions for, the last two guys, but there's questions to still be asked. And I think for Petty, easily the question could be same as Kyle, season MVP. For Chris, defensive player of the year. Maybe even winning at a different position. But for Austin, the two championships that he does have, SBA South Beach, one of those teams that will go, one of those Mount Rushmore teams. They were very dominant, so dominant that, I was on the side of when they came out with 5 centers and we lost. Another team, I think they came out with all point guards and they won. So, I mean, very, very dominant team. I think regular season, Austin was leading the way, but in the finals, things changed. I'll never forget people were watching that finals like I was, and they were, asking questions of why Austin was so timid, so passive, and he did not have your he wasn't regular season Austin, and of course because of that he didn't win Finals MVP. And be honest with you, he wasn't even the second best player on that team. That was Josh. Josh, even in that run in that playoff run, was a menace. He was a zone buster, while Petty was just defensively a monster in the middle. And of course, Austin was in the lanes, on the perimeter, but where Josh was a zone buster and easily probably could have won Finals MVP as well. But he didn't win the Finals MVP. Then the second time, or it was the championship with Bullock, where he was maybe third, fourth player. So the question is, can Austin win as the guy? Can he win the Finals MVP? And even that, I mean, can he be, number two option? That we don't know that question. A lot of people don't may not like that question. He may not even like that question. But I mean, these are just facts. I'm just stating facts here. Now, if some people may feel, oh, well, no, he was the second best player in that finals, but maybe you should probably go back and look at some of the games because I was in those chat and a lot of people was asking those questions of what's going on with Austin. He's not playing. He's playing very passive. He's passing up shots. I mean, he had a game where he didn't even have 10 points, and I'm not trying to dilute. I'm just explaining why a guy like Austin will be at table three. But once again, the list is fluid because very simply, a championship and a finals MVP easily could put this guy right there at the top of table two, just because of all of the other accolades, the multiple MVPs, the all the finals appearances, the versatility, the every year being one of the top guys. Every year is going to be names going to be mentioned, going to ring. I mean, he's one of those guys, no question about it. One of those guys, but he's a table three guy until further notice, at least on my book. Hey, and once again, I'm just your local analyst, and nobody paid me to do this, so just doing it. So thanks. Um, Once again, thank you for my sponsors, Ronald Raymond Consulting. Now, there's two more people at this table. Now, this part was very, very hard. This was had to be the hardest two spots to put people in because after all those names we just mentioned, there is, I hate to say, just a little bit of a separation because you don't have the all the finals MVPs, you don't have all the MVPs, the multi-time champions. It becomes a little bit lumped together, right? And there's only two more spots, so there's going to be a lot of names that won't be listened or mentioned in the at these tables. But I just had to really think about it, really look over it. I did some research. I asked asked around, and one of these guys, the third guy that I'm going to put at this table, I think number one, his game speaks for itself. I think his game speaks for itself. He's another guy that he's a champion. He's a Finals MVP. He is an MVP of the league. He's a Rookie of the Year. He has all those things. I think the only difference is he only has one title. So that's the difference. But I would say this, he also has not played as long in as many seasons as a lot of these guys, other guys have. But in one season, became a champ, a Rookie of the Year, an MVP, a Finals MVP, and it was crazy. The next year, got traded. It was crazy. So you know who I'm talking about. Terrence T. Bucket. Also very versatile. Can I mean, there's not a lot of guys that even Bullock is not one of these guys that can go 1 through 5 and be just as dominant. I don't know T as a let's say a 5 being dominant, but 1 through 4 for sure. Like, man, so can kill you in a lot of ways. So the game speaks for itself. Had a great season, and always is gonna have some stellar seasons. Even had a great season at Texas, especially once he went to point guard. They just did that switch up a little bit late. Been hooping out big time, especially from the beginning of the season or beginning of the 2K year, where he really struggled to find a shot, even went to normal. But now, as I said he would, he's doing his thing. So T is the third person at this table. If there's any question to ask, right? It's a question that Bullock asks. He says he don't care as much. He's not as locked in, and that's fine. That's fine. That's cool. Even being a reserve this year, didn't even want the headache. And because there are bigger things in life, but for the people who love the competitive side of it, then that's a question. That's a question. Last guy at the table. Now, I don't know how people are gonna feel about this. But I really thought long and hard about this. I'm telling you, I went around in my head because you got you got a guy who's season MVP champion in his own right. You got another guy who's multi-time champion, rookie of the year, probably arguably one of the best slashers to, you know, to play consistently. I mean, just we just from season one to now still, you know, gonna be at the top of the list of a slasher. And I think you guys all know who I'm talking about here. But I really ran this around in my head to figure out. But the kicker, the tiebreaker, may I say, it always will be the most absolute thing that you can do, and that is win a title. And this guy's championship's first title was easily the Kobe to Kyle's Shaq. So it wasn't that he was a role player. He wasn't just, third, fourth option. We're talking about the number two guy offensively, and even in averaged over 20 points in that finals. Of course, me being on that team, so I know what he did. And then, of course, was also one of the first guys to actually win a second title. A lot of guys was chasing, trying to get to that title number two. He was one of those first guys to be able to do it, and was also once again on the scouting report, second best player on that team behind Kyle being number one. Number two was the guy who had the 99 dunk, and Steve once again as a role player happened to really step up in that finals. But it's got to go to Rob, the ball-headed assassin. Once again, something I not as well. Um, Once again, another guy. You know, I think some of the questions that we all would ask would be, once again, Finals MVP, MVP. Will he ever win one of those? Very, very hard to say. The league has changed. The level of talent has changed. So very hard to say. But I would say one of those guys that's always going to be at the top. I think if you put him in the right situation, can easily be, one of those guys that to be able to get an MVP of the league because he's a guy, if you put him in the right spot around it with the right talent around him, I think he can do his thing. But he's the guy that I'm going to put at this table. He takes the last spot. But once again, the list is fluid. And since he's the last guy at the table, I mean, he's the first one to go. So, hey, man, there's a lot of guys that could possibly do that. I mean, it could be Greg, who that was the guy I was thinking about putting there in the first spot, in the first place. But the lack of finals appearances, and less championships, I had to go with the more championships and even the more finals appearances. And another young guy that I think that I want to make sure I talk about this here. Because this right here, because I really thought about putting him at table number four. So table number four is this table's gonna be a little bit bigger, 5 chairs, but it's not your stars. This is not your stars of the league. Those guys I just mentioned, I always feel like they're, this is like that top of the, top of the top layer, top guys, and this fourth table is going to be a role player table. Of course, I'm a role player. I gotta show love for the role players. Gotta do it. It's for us. All my role players. Say woo woo. Yeah. If you did it, you lame. But like literally, I have to do that for my role players, right? We got five chairs at this table. Once again, there's only one guy that can get up from this table and track over to table three, communicate a little bit. Can't sit down, however. Can't sit down, but possibly one day could possibly definitely sit down, But for now, you stay at the role player table, right? Five five guys at this particular table. I'll tell you those guys in a minute. And then I'm gonna give some shout outs to some guys that just kind of fell a little bit outside of the star table and fell outside of the role player table. To me, the number one role player and you know, at this table, head of the table, head of the role player, division, head of that, whatever you want to call it. This guy is a multi-time champion. Once again, most absolute thing, multi-time champion. And then the other piece of it is too, is as a role player, can you win? Is it possibly that you can win an award? Is it possible that you can win, offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year? At one point, we had the role player of the year. Do we have people that can win those particular things? That kind of gives you, if you are a role player and let's say you're a two-time champion, the separator would be simply if you have a DPOY, if you have an offensive player of the year, or if you are a one-time champ, whatever. Like role players is a little bit different because at the end of the day, we all play a role. Now, that guy at the top of this role player is, like I said, two-time champion, offensive player of the year. And to me, just like I said, that, arguably I say, that Rob is one of the greatest slashers we've ever seen. This guy is possibly, arguably, the greatest shooter, the greatest sniper this ZBL league has ever seen. If you don't know who I'm talking about, it's my Tyler Coleman. Tyler Coleman. I want to give a special shout out to Tyler Coleman, man, because he was my rook. Tyler Coleman was my rook. He was I drafted him, and everybody who knows Tyler, who's been playing with him, for a long time, I never got a chance to play with Tyler Coleman, the 5'9" maker. That's the first thing I heard was like Tyler Coleman always make these 5'9" guards. But this is how green Tyler was when we drafted him. Like Robbie, who was also on the team as well, was taking him was working with him, like to find a jumper, to find his game, to help him. And then next thing of course, what happened is, his game hadn't developed yet. So I ended up trading him. And then eventually that same season, you start to see little snippets of it, like, okay, he's found that shot. And then the very next season, he exploded to what you see now, you know, the that's too much space. That guy, he's too far away. No, don't worry about it. No, no, it's green. Don't worry. That's just Tyler. Tyler. I mean, this guy, um, he's one of the only role players that's on your scouting report. Like that's how good he is as a role player. And I couldn't put him at easily. You could put him at maybe table three, but I mean, who you taking T out the table? Probably not. Some people could probably argue that Rob, but I couldn't because I know from a finals perspective where Robbie was on the scouting report compared to Tyler, right? There's just it's just a little bit of a difference of what you bring. Tyler is, I mean, Robbie's not even close to the shooter, right? But Robbie does have a bag. Robbie does slack. There's other things, right? So I had to put Tyler at this table because I think as a role player, like no question, a guy who can actually, once again, offensive player of the year, a guy who, as a role player, also averaged 20 plus points a game, and still was considered a role player even for that because that team just has so much talent on it, right? But Tyler for sure, top of that table, head of that table, right? Now, let's go to the next guy. Next guy is a multi-time champion. And once again, he's another one that separated himself with a DPOY. And I think that, you know, he almost would have been at the head of this table as well. But I just think that what Tyler brings offensively, I mean, as a guy that can easily be at table three, you're gonna have some people trying to figure out is Tyler, is he a role player? But I think this guy, no question, is a role player. He's even said himself, he's a role player. Um, age, celery stick, Keyshawn, Keyshawn, yo. See, I can't do his voice, but hey, listen, like I think you want to talk about a power forward that that does apps what you want a power forward to do. That's him. You know, if you are looking to draft a power forward and you want to make a build, you want to shape it the way you want to shape it, talk to him because you want as a guy who's played power, who loves my favorite position is power forward. I'll give him all the credit in the world. I mean, no question about it. Defensive player of the year, once again, two-time champion. And I mean, just the glue guy does everything you need. Rarely makes mistakes defensively, going to clean up all your mistakes defensively, and then also going to be a knockdown shooter and do what you need him to do. So I think no question about it at this table deserves to be at this table mainly because of multi-time champion and also won a defensive player of the year. Question mark is going to be something that Bullock mentioned, and that is can he win without playing with just his guys? He wants to play every time with just his guys, his group of people. Will he? And when he can't do that, he exits the league or exit himself out of it. Can he like because there's a it's easy to just get the people that you want to play with and you guys have chemistry. You know you're gonna be good, but can you get through the grind and start a season where you are fourth in the league or you're third in the league? Chris Taylor, for instance. Chris, we were fourth in the league, barely made the playoffs, got in there, won the entire thing. Kyle, we once again, last one in, upset, upset WGG. We got game, made it to the finals, won. I mean, these things, these things matter when it comes to that. Those are questions, right? So, as a player who has been able to do that twice now as a two-time champion, also a defensive player of the year, you I'm going to put myself at this table. You darn right I'm at this table because as a player who gets drafted, or I was drafted for one team, the other team I was a captain. I think anybody who played on my team knows what I bring in the locker room. If you put me in a 4-5 game series with a team and we have a full season, the reason why most of my teams is really bad and they become really good is because the more footage I got and the more I can say, all right, this guy doesn't like going this way. Let's play him this way. Let's play zone on this team. The more I get there, then the better off we'll be because I can, compare myself to, I will say, let's say Professor X. Not the best at the game. We know that. But what if the where get out the way where for me it's going to be is the mental part, the IQ part, the team morale part, keeping things together. We're down 15. We got this. No, it's okay. Rob, get out your head. Go dunk on something. Shout out to Ryan for that too. But those things matter. Those things that people don't really see on the tape. And I think that, it's the other reason why I did this role player thing because you need role players. I think that people like I'll use North Carolina last season. I was in the boat with them. I was riding with them, and they traded one of the best role players, at the power forward position, Phil, for a rival who once again, can get a bucket, right? And they went downhill because you need a role player. You need a Keyshawn, you know? You need a Hunter. You need a Lou. You need these type of players. Everybody can't be great. Everybody can't be like you. Somebody has to be able to, because we've seen these names. We've seen 5 names or all-star players team up together and not even make the finals. We've seen that. So you got to have role players. Now, after those 3 names, myself, Tyler, Keyshawn, it became very sticky. These last 2 names became very sticky because then, once again, what the separation for those 3 is multi-time champion, and then also being able to win either, an award, offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, things like that, right? After that, now what we do now after that, we don't have we this is what we have. We have one guy who is a multi-time champion and, you know, but none of the finals MVPs, none of the MVPs, anything like that. But then we have another guy who's a champion, won a finals MVP, a champion, won a finals MVP, and 2 guys that are one-time champions and they both won defensive players of the year. That's where it became very, very hard because the most absolute thing are championships. But as a role player, if you can get out of your role and become bigger by whether that's being a defensive player of the year, or a Finals MVP like two of these guys were, that's where it becomes much so harder, right? So I'm going to do the process of elimination. So one of those guys is Steve. Steve is a champion. Steve is a Finals MVP. But because of the lack of seasons, because of also at times, if we're just being honest, the lack of morale that we all know Steve can bring at times, he he will not be at this table. But I wanted to make sure I mention his name though, because he was one of those guys that is a champion and then also won Finals MVP, which I thought was pretty darn good. Right? All right. That's one guy down. Now, uh, one of those guys that I'm for sure I'm gonna put him in here, and it's mainly because of the longevity. I may be a little partial as well. But this guy is a champion. He is a Finals MVP and won that title with me. Is helped me get my second championship, and that goes to Phil. Phil is at the table, and then once again, I don't think there's anybody that can question what Phil does. I think most people outside of the people that may mention Keyshawn, if you mention power forwards, you're going to mention the Phil. You're going to say, I want Phil on my team. I won't, because we all know that plays the role. He's going to rebound. He's going to defend. He's going to affect shots. He's going to hit the shot. If you get him the ball early and often, because at times he can become gun shy, but if you give him the ball early and often, he gets his confidence up. I mean, we're really talking about a guy that is that can be a knockdown shooter. Trust me, I know because he helped me get to the finals by becoming that knockdown shooter. So, Tyler, Keyshawn, myself, Bill, last role player, last role player. And I'll go ahead and tell you these names. Champion, Defensive Player of the Year, Hunter. Champion, Defensive Player of the Year, Twizop, Twiz. People say what they want to say, but I mean, it is what it is. He's a champ. He's a Defensive Player of the Year. Both of those things done in two different seasons. So, I mean, I give respect where respect is due. And because if anybody could do it as a role player, then everybody on this list would have a Defensive Player of the Year. But everybody does not have a Defensive Player of the Year that was listed as a role player, quote unquote. And then lastly, I want to make sure I mention this guy's name, Johnny Fly. Johnny Fly is a two-time champ, and all of it has been as a role player playing for Bullock. I'll make sure I mention his name, but unfortunately, he did not make the final cut. But Johnny Fly, I want to make sure I mention his name. I want to make sure I also mention Twiz's name as well, because the guy who's going to sit at this table is going to be Hunter. Hunter's going to sit at this table because of being a champion, being a defensive player of the year, also being a great morale guy, being dependable, which, you know, that question may come up for some, being dependable, being able to knock down that shot. And then also just being, I mean, winning defensive player of the year, that's a big thing. I mean, that's not a slot. That's 12 games, 12 to 16 games of being consistently what held your team together. And and doing that is not easy, but that also means that you held the team down and you were one of those guys. And the question for Johnny and the question for Twiz would be the dependability, but then also with Johnny is, I don't think he's ever been in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, but he's always been very dependable. But I don't think that the time span, the time put in, most of the teams he's played with has been, with Bullock. So it's just a little bit different. But I want to make sure I just mention the name. I also want to mention these names. James, Champion, Lou, B. Ross, Ryan, JP, George, once again, Steve, all those guys um, have, and if I'm missing any names, please forgive me. But all those names, from a role player standpoint, they're all champions as well. And once again, the list is fluid. The list is fluid. List is fluid. So eventually, a lot of those guys could be completely knocked out. So, four tables, one table being the role player. Role player, head of the table, Tyler Coleman, Keyshawn, Truth, Phil, Hunter, role player, table. Who's at your table? Who's at your table? Table three, stars, head of the table, Petty, two-time champion, Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Role Player of the Year, Austin, we know who he is. T, Terrence, and Robinski. Who's at your table? Make sure I mention Martin. Martin, specifically Martin. Martin could go two ways. Martin is a champion, right? Martin could very well come and sit at the role player table. Or he could be one of the next stars of the ZBL. It's up to him. He chooses that. Was able to win his first title with the Raptors. Went and to me got a bigger role with Kansas, and that team did make the finals. And he was not there in that finals, not nothing due to his own he had some circumstances going on, but was unable to be there, and well, for a bunch of different reasons. So we weren't able to see what he could have done, how he could have possibly changed that series around. That could have been that that chance to become that star, right? But as of right now, with the Raptors, he was a role player. Finals MVP, Kyle, MVP, Ajante. I mean, he was a role player. So now this season have been as tapped in, but I'll let you guys answer that. Is he a role player? Is he a star player? So for me, he's one of those guys. That name could go either way. We'll see how how he decides to choose and where he decides to go with his 2K career. Table two, head of the table, Kyle, Sat, Yodi, Red Smoothie himself, Big Swoosh, Chris, and the head of the table, table one, head of the building, the guy, the guy, Agote, Ajante. I want to know what you guys think, man. I want to like this. This was created and thought of because of some back and forth, and I just felt like it was a good thing to kind of talk about and bring the facts. Bring the facts. Have some stuff to back up your facts. Like championships are facts. Can't defend finals MVPs are facts. MVPs, all these things. This the most absolute thing once again is the championships. But for sure, like being and even in the running, and I've never been in the running for Finals MVP. Nobody would ever mistake me for a Finals MVP because that's just not my role, right? So to even be in the running for it, if you won it, that means that you were in the running for it because you did something right. So these are not things. These things are not easy, but they are at times votes that we all may look at, question, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, facts are facts. We can say who's one of them ones and who's this, that, and the other, but fives runs, they're fives runs. They're runs. Cool. What do you do in the league? What do you do when it's who coined this? I don't know. I can't remember if it was Greg, Josh, or Ajante. It's regular season. Then there's playoffs. Then there's finals. There's levels to it. What do you do in the finals? What do you do in the playoffs? Does your game go down or does your game go up? Do you rise to the occasion? So, guys, once again, this episode is brought to you by RonaldRaymondConsulting.com and also brought to you by the world famous world author Gabrielle Deloach book titled Mama, Mama, Where's Your Smile? If you have not gotten your copy, please go get your copy. If you are a father, get a copy for your child. If you are a husband, get a copy for your wife because it talks about some very, very deep things there. Um, so if those this episodes are brought to you by those things. But once again, Rome, Watch Your Narrative presents the League. We're out.